right. Like Paul said, I'm hoping you see my PowerPoint.
Certainly can.
Okay, good. So I'm Tracy Dodona. I'm with Alithya, formerly Full Scope, and I have with me here today Ginger Griffith and Reddy Buram, who's going to help with discussion and help with answering any questions. We use the business process modeler heavily in our organization. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to focus more on kind of like tips and tricks we learn with using different aspects of the business process model to share that knowledge with everyone. But then we're also hoping to have a discussion around how you're using it as well. So we like to cover the business process modeler as we talk about it in terms of value layers. So depending on how much you put into it is how much you'll get out of it, like most other things. You can start simple with just using the structure, or you can enhance your business process model and add, enrich it with Visio flows, generating task recordings. We also we generate the Word documents when we create our task recordings with the screenshots, and our customers like to have that extra bit of documentation. And then running your task recordings as task guides and what options you have on enhancing those task guides, and then using the playback task recording, kind of when it's useful and when it's not. So that's the high level. After each of these little sections, we're going to have polls thrown in, and then we're going to try to do a little bit of a discussion on each topic just to talk about how everyone is using it. Just to level set, I'm pretty sure everyone on the call already knows this, but just in case, LCS, Lifecycle Services, set of tools by Microsoft to help manage your implementation, and then BPM is just one of the tools in the entire LCS tool set, and that's what we're going to focus on today. There's already been a discussion on the DevOps, and there was discussion in that call on how the BPM can link to DevOps. There was also a discussion on RSAT and how the BPM can be used in RSAT. So today we're going to focus on just the BPM aspect of that. And then I'll use the term artifacts. It's a Microsoft term. It's what they call all the little pieces that might be attached to the BPM, whether it be a Visio flow or a recording, generically speaking, artifacts. So like I said, we're going to talk about each of the layers. We'll talk about possible usages for each, the additional value that that particular layer can provide, how to use it. I'm going to go briefly over that, and we'll try to spend more of our time on tips and tricks. Paul, can you run the first poll question?
I certainly will.
Thank you. And then we'll come back to the answer, and we'll come back to this after the end of this first section. So just what percentage of your implementations use BPM to some level?
Can everybody
so I'm going to start
that question in the chat window? Yeah, perfect. Yes. Thank you.
We can.
Great. All right, I'm going to start with the BPM structure. So the BPM structure, you can use BPMs for a variety of different reasons in your organization. We use them heavily as an industry focus. So we build out business process models for our key industries. So we have a food BPM, a chemical BPM, and then in those particular BPMs is we focus on the functionality that is critical for that particular industry, and we make sure that all of those parts of the BPM are built out specific to that particular industry. So if you're process manufacturing, we make sure we build out things like batch potency and batch attributes and item tracing. We also use the BPM as part of our CRPs. So the project team will start with the industry BPM that's most relevant to their customer, and then they'll create CRP nodes within their BPM that highlight what they're going to focus on, which business process they're going to cover in each of the individual CRPs. With some customers, if they're just doing a particular implementation of a particular module, then their BPM obviously would be just that one module. And then we also have BPMs. We have intellectual property called our Edge for Operations, and we have a BPM for that. And so if a given customer we're implementing a given customer and they have purchased our IP as well, then the industry BPM will be merged with our IP BPM so that the customer will end up with a business process model that's unique to what they're using, what aspects of the software that they are using. And then as enhancements are done, every customer has something unique. So if there's enhancements that need to be built out, then those will get added to that customer's version of their BPM. At the end of the day, the idea is they'll have a step-by-step instructions, training repository for new users, and can be used as a starting point in testing or RSAT as well. So managing your libraries, obviously, a new library creates an empty structure. We don't ever do new libraries anymore. We always copy an existing library. For a while, the copy function in BPM wasn't always copying all of the artifacts. So sometimes like the Visio documents wouldn't get copied over, and those issues have all been resolved, at least as far as what we've seen. And so when you copy a BPM, it copies everything over with it. So the structure that you had, any task recordings that were there, as well as any Visio documents that might have been attached. You can edit the BPM, which is just editing the name and the description of that particular BPM. And then you have the delete option, which will delete the entire library and everything with it. A little tip here. So when you grant someone access to your project, you're granted access to anything within your project libraries, including the delete option. There's no ability, we have requested it with Microsoft, but currently there is no ability to limit who's allowed to delete. If you have access to the project, you have access to delete any of the project libraries. So as a tip for us, we learned that the hard way. We have a backup project where we will copy BPMs over and make sure we save old versions of the BPMs just in case. We were able to get a BPM back from Microsoft that was accidentally deleted, but it was a lot of time and effort that we didn't necessarily need. So that's one tip in using the BPMs, is have a backup plan in place for the business process libraries. I'm going to talk a little bit about, so you have project libraries, corporate libraries, and the global libraries. You probably already know the global libraries are, Microsoft provides them. You can't edit them or touch them, but you can copy from them. And then your corporate libraries are those within your organization or within your project that have been published. They are protected. You can't maintain or delete the corporate libraries. But you can copy from them. And then anything within the project libraries, those are your working copies of your BPM. So for our implementations, that's where their main BPM is that they're enhancing and building upon. When a BPM is attached, when a project is attached to a D365 environment, you have an option to run the task recordings that are associated to your business process library. And the BPMs that are available to you when you're in D365 are the ones that are within your project library. So if you want to run a task guide from your D365 environment, you need to make sure that the library you want to run it from is one of your project libraries. And I'll show you where that comes into play later as well. All right, still from the structure, there's a couple of tips we've learned in using the BPM structure. Obviously, you know about the search, which will search through the business processes and any of the tasks. One thing to know about the search function is it's not just searching the name of the node here. It's actually searching the details behind it. So we have some implementations where they complain that the search function isn't working because it's bringing back way more than what they think it should. And that's because whatever they're searching on, those words that are found in the details of the document, in the actual process steps that are stored within this particular document. So if you're going to use the search, it's really good to focus your search, use quotes. So if you're going to search on quality groups, if I just put quality groups in the search, it'll bring back me every node that has the word quality or the word groups, not just at the high level, but in the details. So you'll end up with way too many results that don't make a lot of sense. But if you quote it, then you will find only references to where quality groups together are found. And you also can do a search on form name. So if you want to find any business process that starts on a particular form, you can do a $sign and put the form name within the search, and it will bring back any task that starts on that particular form. Then we have the the tasks, the business process model uses a parent-child relationship. So it uses the, you can create a child, which is a lower level, a sibling, which is at the same level. When you create a child for a given level, so the higher level is your groupings of your business processes, and then below it are the individual steps, the individual task. You know it's an individual task because you have a task recording icon over here that says you have a task recording associated to that particular node. And that's where the task recording artifact is saved. And the system is keeping track of your counts for you. And those are kept over here under the diagrams, is keeping track of how many task recordings you have associated with that particular node in the business process model. And then we also have the reviewed column. So the far right, you have the option to either have a node reviewed or needing to be reviewed. We use that heavily in our CRPs, particularly as we go through and get validation on a given process. We mark that one particular approved because it has passed its CRP. And then updating your structure, adding processes either as children or siblings. Deleting a process, as you probably already know, deletes everything related to it and everything underneath it. So if you delete a higher level process, it will delete everything underneath it as children. We do use the add link option sometimes. So if we have a given task that is reused across business processes, maybe it's something like a certain type of reason code that's used in different business processes, the same reason code. Instead of creating multiple copies of that task recording, we'll create a link. We'll create one task recording, and then we'll just link it in various places within the business process that it's relevant. Importing them, you can import from other business process libraries. We do this a lot as we find some of our mixed mode implementations where they have both process and discrete. We'll import business processes from other BPMs so that we have a complete BPM for our customer. And then obviously moving them around up, down, one at a time or further away in the business process, you can use the move option. And then over here we have the overview options, what you can do for each element in the business process. Editing mode just allows you to edit the name and the description. The diagram option takes you to the system generated flows, which are going to be deprecated. Microsoft has been talking about deprecating it for a couple years now, but it really will be gone. They are not doing any further development on those system generated business process flows. But the diagram option will also take you to the process steps, which are the most relevant. This Word document option, we get a lot of confusion because we do generate those Word documents with the screenshots. People think that this Word document here is going to give them that, and it doesn't. The Word document that gets generated when you create your task guide with all the screen captures is independent of the BPM. It has to be stored. It's created and stored separately. This little doc option, all this does is it takes the words of the process steps and throws it in a Word template for you. And it is done on the fly. So when you click the button, it'll create that Word document for you. It is not bringing up some created document that's been created in the past. You can upload your task recordings, which we find pretty useful. And then because I'm on a node that's already reviewed, I have the option to clear it. If it wasn't reviewed yet, this would tell me I have the option to mark it as reviewed. One little tip or issue that we found along the way was that if you are on a particular node within your business process library and you create a task recording for it, like let's say I have here create a nonconformance and I have a task recording. If I go now and create a child node from this node, it lets me do that, except I can't ever get back to that task recording anymore. So you want to make sure when you're adding nodes that you're not going to add a child to a node that already has a task recording. It messes up your count, so the system will count it as a valid, it knows that there is there, but you won't be able to clearly see where it is, and you won't be able to play it as a task guide within D365. This is just showing you the process steps. So if you click that diagram option here, So we worked with Microsoft for a while, trying to convince them to enhance these flows. And it ended up being that it was too difficult to get them the way everybody wanted them to get them. Everyone wanted them to look a little bit different. And so they ended up deprecating this. When you go here now, you'll see a big red sign saying that this functionality will be deprecated. They are keeping the Visio flows option, so you can create your own flows and attach them to any steps within the business process library. And we'll talk about that in the next topic. But the most relevant part is these process steps here that will still show from the BPM once the generated flows are gone. You'll just be able to view the process steps, and they'll have more real estate on your form. All right.
Okay, so I'm going to take over for a minute and give Tracy a little bit of a break, and maybe we can have some discussion. One of the things that we have a poll too now. We can go ahead and do that as well. One of the things that I wanted to say is that one way of creating this whole process is to bring in consultants from the field. Those folks like Tracy and I used to be that worked in the trenches, and get them in here and say, how do you go about this? So that's one of the ways we got started building the structure. And then when we got to a point where we felt like we needed some expertise in a particular area, like finance, for example, then we would go in and bring our finance group in and ask them to help put together the finance structure and do some of the finance recordings. So we were putting together some discussion questions, and one of the things we wanted to ask is, how are you using your BPM in your organization, or how do you plan to use it? So if anybody wants to step up and talk a little bit about that, we'd like to hear about that.
Anybody?
Volunteers, please.
Come on.
Paul, was the poll question done? I think it was. I don't see it.
Yeah,
so
I did. Yeah. So we've done question 1.
Okay.
And I've just published question 2, which is the enrich your BPM with Visio.
Okay.
Paul, do you want to tell us about the response to the poll question number 1?
Of course I can. Yeah. So 0 to 10%, we've got 27%. 10 to 50, we've got 9%. 50 to 80, 27%. And 80 plus, 80% plus is 36%. So we've got a total of 11 votes. So
Okay.
I know we've got more than 11 people on this call today. So if you've not submitted to the poll on question 1, then please do so now.
Yeah, so it sounds like we have a lot of people who are using the BPM, and a lot of people who have it all set up and have some experience with it. So maybe we can get someone to tell us a little bit about how they're using it and what their experiences are. I guess everybody's like a little quiet this morning. I guess it's maybe afternoon or evening where you are.
Shy bunch.
It's been a long day.
Yeah. We don't have a shy bunch where we were. We have to tell people to stop talking sometimes.
This is Michael from Scales in Denmark.
Yes, Michael, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I can say we're not using BPM, and I want to turn the question around and ask you, what is the value? Why are you using BPM? Because we cannot see the value for our customers.
That's a good question. I can tell you some of my experiences from being out with customers and the value that I felt like it brought to them. They really like the fact that a lot of the documentation is already done for them, because if you go through each of those recordings, you can easily assess the documentation that's out there. And so they, in building their own documentation library, a lot of the work is already done for them, and they can go in and they can see it and they can use it not only for the implementation, but down the road when they have people who new people that come in and they need to learn some things about the system, they can set them in front of the documentation and the task recording and help them kind of move through the process. And with the and so that's one of the things that we found is beneficial for folks. And in the implementation, it's actually beneficial for consultants as well, because let's say maybe the last project I worked on was a chemical project, and the next project that I may be going to is a food project. Well, there's some differences there that maybe I knew but have forgotten. If I worked in the chemical world for a couple of years and I didn't do any catch weight processing, and then when I moved to the food world, I'm like, yeah, I know how to do that, but things have changed since I did it last. And so I would go into, as an independent consultant, without working with the customer, I may go in and run through a few of those task guides and a few of those steps and take a look at them and go, oh yeah, now I remember how to do this. Look at the data that's out there. And the data is a big part of it as well. We haven't talked really about the data yet, but one of the other changes that we made that I think has been very beneficial is when we started a project, we used to have consultants that would walk into a customer's workplace, and that's the first time they'd met each other. So that was a little upsetting for our customers, because they're like, how can they work together if they don't even know each other? So one of the things we started doing is bringing people in before the project into our office in Alpharetta, letting them get to know each other, and also taking a look at the data for the project. We requested data ahead of time, getting some data loaded, and sort of some pre-analysis work that really helped a lot, and making sure that the data was in the right environment so that when they do run these task recordings, they'll have good information to start with. So they don't have to start from zero. They don't have to do configuration from zero. They don't have to do documentation from zero. It also gives them a structure so they kind of know what they need to do next. You know, it's almost like a mini project plan laid out there.
Right.
Yeah.
But this requires that you maintain a process model for the different industries that you're in.
Right.
Because I mean, when BPM first came out and you had the APQC, I mean, we were very excited about that because we were actually getting something from Microsoft. But starting out with that model, you know, there were so many holes in that. So from our perspective, we felt that we had to build up so much work ourselves that it was difficult to see like a business case in that. And then that was deprecated, and then. Yeah, we have not really found the value. I guess maybe a lot of our customers, you know, D365 is just a small part of the process. So a lot of customers, they feel that, well, it's better to do the process documentation somewhere else in order to get a full end-to-end flow.
Yeah, I guess you do have to find a fit for it for everybody, and maybe it's not the same for everyone as it was for us, for sure. So it's good to get this kind of information from other folks as well.
No, but it's very interesting, and so I hear a lot of people that you know, the people that use it, they are very fond of it. So you know, I'm here to maybe get fond of it again and see if we can start using it.
Well, you are correct in the aspect that it is a lot of work. I mean, Tracy and I put hours and hours. There's no telling how many hours. We don't want to know how many hours we have put into it. Yeah. And like just one of our express structures contains close to 700 recordings. And that's just one. So we have food, we have chemical, we have medical now, and we have discrete. So we have a lot of them out there, and each one of them, at least now we are to the point, like Tracy said, that we don't have to start from nothing. We can copy things over and kind of adjust them to whatever industry we may be working on, or whatever industry we're building it out for. So
yeah, and I guess, you know, you need to maintain this with 8 yearly updates as well. You know, the processes, they change all the time. So.
That's true. That's true. That was one of our discussion questions here, is how you keep it updated. Yeah. That's perfect. You just led right into it. Yeah. So that is one of the things that is a challenge. You do have, it's not like something you build and walk away from, for sure. But in another point too, before we move on to this spot, but I wanted to say that we also use it for doing some testing. So like Tracy is, she's responsible for our IP product Edge. So one of the things that Tracy does when a new update comes out is she'll use the Edge BPM process to just run through a quick test to get a high level of, are there any major issues? You know, does the IP work still well with the new version of D365? So that's another way we use it. It's kind of it's not one of the ways it was really intended to be used, but it's one of the things that we found is a benefit as well. Okay. And then these tips and tricks make a lot of difference. I mean, we've learned these things from quite a bit of pain sometimes, so there are some things out there that we know that, if we could all share those things, it would be nice as well. So yeah, it's not for the weak-hearted. I can tell you that. You have to be pretty tough. And
one other comment I have, yeah.
Sorry,
that's okay, no problem. On the maintenance piece of it, so we don't tell our implementation teams that the BPM is everything you need, right? We tell them it's maybe 80%, maybe. And that if it's missing something, then that's their expertise needs to come in and build that out. And to varying levels, we've been able to pull some of that content back. So they find there's something that's not in the BPM that they needed on a given project. We try to capture that information and bring it back into the business process model so that other projects can benefit from that knowledge as well. But it's hard. It's been a challenge making sure we're able to get to kind of continuously improve the business process models as we go through. Yeah. But it's something we strive for.
Because that's what I thought was the brilliant idea with the APQC process. So, Microsoft would deliver standard processes for everything, and then we could build from there. And I guess the reason why they stopped doing that was because they found it to be too time consuming to actually maintain this. So it's amazing that you are able to do that.
I hear that pain.
We started at it around 2015 or so with 2012. So there's a lot of investment that we have put into this. And definitely it is an investment, but what we learn from it is it streamlines the implementation process and also gives the customers a good tool to leverage from a training standpoint. And later on, from an RSAT standpoint, this is going to be critical as well. If you're going to be taking on the one version updates that you have to with FNO. All right.
Thanks, Reddy.
Sure.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going unless somebody had another comment.
No, there's no more questions, I don't think, Tracy, so I think we can move on.
Okay, great. Thanks, Paul. And you already did the poll on the Visio one, right?
The Visio one's launched, yes, so please post your vote.
Great. Okay, so this topic is short, but I did want to make sure I talk about it. So since the system-generated flow charts that get created when you create your task recording is being deprecated, we find that the customers like the Visio option. So we have some standard Visios, high-level Visios that we include as a sample in our business process models. But the real idea is that if a given customer feels that a flow would help them with their documentation and help understand a particular process, then the idea is they build their own Visio flows and attach them to various parts of the business process model. So as I said, we have some that we provide out of the box with our business process models, but the idea is that they would build their own. They'd make their own Visio flows if they needed that additional visual view of the process. But a couple of things we learned around using the Visio flows. The one thing we like about the Visio flows better than the system-generated ones is also that you are allowed to attach them at different levels of your business process. So the system-generated flows are only on an individual task that has a task recording, which a lot of times is very granular. It's a very small process. The Visio flows, you can attach them at higher levels. So you can put an overall flow for processing a batch order or overall flow for processing a sales order. At a higher level, you can attach them within your business process model, which makes more sense for flows. You can only have one Visio flow attached to a given task in your business process model. If you attempt to upload a second one, it will overwrite the first one. And then one thing that this was a request that we provided to Microsoft that we finally see in the system is that there used to not, you couldn't tell that there was a Visio flow attached at a particular level. And one thing Microsoft has done is they've added the Visio icon now. So if there is a flow on a particular level within the business process model, then you'll see the little Visio icon next to it in the business process model, which tells you that you have a Visio document there that you can look at. We did the poll already. Do we have the poll answers, Paul?
We certainly do. So
I don't see them. I don't know why. I used to see them when we practiced this.
when we tested this the other day, you could see this.
Yeah, but I can't see them now.
Tracy, if you click on chat, that's where you can see them. So for those that is not popping up, if you go to chat, you will see the poll question.
It's funny. I don't see them now, but that's fine. Keep going.
That's okay.
I'm in chat.
I've got it all here. So 79% yes.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Good. So let's talk about these flows for a few minutes. 79% of you said yes, so you must be attaching your flows like we were talking about. Is that kind of what everybody's doing? Does anybody want to speak to the Visio flows and how you attach them, and if it's has brought any benefit to you? I know for us, it's kind of completed the documentation package. You have the Word document with all the wordage for the BPM, and then you now have the flows. So anybody want to talk about how they're using those flows, if they're doing them, and how they're using them?
Just a mic and ask away.
I think this is one area that we wish if we had more time, we would build out more Visio flows, because the customers really like seeing them when they're included in the business process model. But the problem is they're time consuming to do. And a lot of times the process might be tweaked at the customer site. So they change them and build their own anyway. So
it kind of gives them a place to start, at least.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Keith has his hand up there. Let's see if Keith wants to speak.
Go on,
Yeah,
Keith.
there's with the videos on any project, I will always produce a few, but they might initially be very, quite high level, like an overview video of production, rather than, 400 Visios for every single process. And depending how formal the client is, their timescale and the budget, whether we do 5 Visios or 50 Visios or 500, and if it does start to be a lot of Visios because they want nearly everything covered by Visios, we'll do the first and higher level ones, and then we'll give it to their core team to develop the more detailed Visios.
I think that's a good point.
And I think I was just thinking a while ago, that's one of the things, a lot of this, we start, at least give them a base, and then we turn it over to them. And one of the things we always say to our customers is, this is yours, this is your property, these are your flows, and now we're giving this to you, and you're going to take it and you're going to update this and maintain it just like you do your system. And at first they're sort of taken aback by that sometimes, but then after a while they're comfortable with it, and they'll take it and go with it. And I think they learn a lot from doing those Visio flows. I mean, I think it's a very good educational process to go through and to have some structure, but then kind of leave it up to them to go through and figure out what the rest of that structure is, or more details, like you said, give them a high level and then go down to the details with them, even if that means you have to sit with them, and do it with them. I do think there's a lot of benefit that comes from going through a flow. So, and they are not easy, but it is worth it in the end. I always resisted in the beginning when I was on a project, but then I finally gave in and said, okay, we'll do it.
Great. Okay, I'm going to move on. Timing wise, we're about halfway through the session. So the next topic we're going to talk about is the actual task recordings. So the creation of the task recordings, and then the generated Word document that many of our customers like having. So creating the task recorder as a general practice, as Ginger mentioned, we have hundreds and thousands probably of task recordings. We do try to name them consistently. We name the actual task recording based on where in the business process node we're attaching it to. So we try wherever the node is that we're going to place it on, that's what we name the task recording as a general practice. So what am I creating a task recording from, and where am I going to put it in the BPM? And then we use that information when creating the task recording. So here I'm just showing you in D365, going to the gear icon, going to the task recorder. We're going to talk about all the different things you can do with this, and we're going to start with the creating of the recording. So this is where the recording name and the description that came from the BPM, we try to keep those in sync just to help us find them. And then the other thing that we do all the time is we always use Chrome in creating the task recording, and we install this extension, this Chrome extension called D365 for Finance and Operations Task Recorder. With that extension, then you have the option to turn this capture screenshot on. And that means that generated Word document that you get will have all the steps that you've executed. And in addition to that, it will have screen captures of what the form looks like as you traverse through that process. So these generated Word documents, I don't think are very valuable without the screen captures. They're just a list of steps that you can see in the BPM by looking at the process steps. But with the screen capture, it provides a lot more value, and our customers like those documents. Provide more value out of those documents. So this is creating the recording. This whole slide is kind of tips and tricks. As we said, we've done a lot of these. So we tend to always, my number one recommendation is to practice what you're going to record before you record it. It does a couple things for you. It reminds you exactly where you want to go. It helps you to avoid, unnecessary clicks when creating the recording. And it also will speed up the recording. We do have an issue where some of our consultants were having trouble when they tried to generate the Word document, it would error out. And that was what we have found is if you practice the recording first and kind of cache everything and then create the recording, then that Word document doesn't have any errors, even for really long ones. We have some task recordings that are more than 100 steps. Those Word documents, when you generate those, would sometimes error if you didn't run through the process first. So that's always one of our tips when we talk to our consultants about creating them. The other one is to start with your fast tabs closed so that the recording is actually recording you opening the right fast tab at the right time. The recording will still record even if your fast tab was already opened. But the task guide is clearer as to where that field is if you record actually opening the fast tab. The task guide runs better if you open the fast tab as you go through the recording. We also always start our task recording at the very beginning where we have all the workspaces. And then we close out, go navigate to what you want to do, what you want to record, and then close out all the forms and get back to where you started. We had one customer project where they had created a bunch of task guides, but they were starting their task guide on the actual form that they wanted to record. And so what the task guide was missing, the task recording was missing, is the navigation to where they had to go to start with. And so they had to go back and either re-record those and insert that step so that the task guide started recording with how do I navigate, where do I got to go to start this business process. And then when we stop the recording, we save it to our PC. That just creates an extra copy of it locally. We do save those off into a SharePoint, so if we ever need to get back to those task recordings, we can. But then we save it to LCS, so this is attaching it to the actual BPM library that you want it attached to. And then we also always do that export as a Word document, which will take the process steps and create a document with the screenshots in it. the big tip here is that that Word document is only stored right now. So once I've recreated this task recording and I've exported it as a Word, the only place that Word document exists is on my computer that I generated it on. It is not attached to the BPM. There is no way to attach it directly to the BPM. So it's a disconnected document that you have to go and put into a SharePoint site for your customer. And with another customer project where they thought it was being automatically saved. They thought when they saved it to LCS that it was saving both the task recording and the Word document, but it doesn't. It only saves the task recording, and the Word document is only on the computer. So they had to go back to all the people who had done task recordings and find their download files and try to gather and find all the missing Word documents. So it's a good tip to remember that you have to save it off. And then the other thing is, when you create your task recording, if you actually enter in data, if you enter in a specific item number, that item number or that customer that you enter would actually be saved in that task recording, in the data behind that task recording. So it's always wise to just select from drop downs, select the 5th record in the list versus entering in a raw material one. So that's always something that we suggest, because we really don't want the data saved in the task recording if we can avoid it. Okay. And this is just showing you what that Word document looks like. So because we have our screen capture on, it not only has the steps 1, 2, 3, 4, but it also shows the screen and what it looks like as you traverse through the process. So our customers like these Word documents. All right, can you do poll 3?
That's all live now, Tracy. So I've just published that.
Thank you.
So,
and you can do poll 4.
All done.
Okay, so now let's have some discussion around task recordings. First, we'd like to find out, do we have a task recording poll in yet, Paul?
We certainly do. I've only got 7 votes though, so if everybody could have a look at the chat and vote for me, please, that'd be fantastic.
Okay. And also, does everybody understand how to do the screenshots with your diagrams and your flows? Because that's that's probably one of the most important pieces of the documentation that we have found, is our customers are very adamant about getting those screenshots, and it does make a huge difference with their documentation. So let's talk about who's using task recordings. Are they used in your implementations? Does anybody want to step up and talk about how they're using task recordings and documentation in their implementations? Oh, I thought we had a speaker there for a minute.
So we can probably just have a look at the results of that vote. Okay,
let's do that. Tell us what it is, Paul.
Tracy. So the less than 100. So we've got 11%. Less than 1,000 is the majority at 56%.
Oh wow.
Less than 10,000 is 22%. That's from 9 votes.
Great.
Okay. So there are a good many people that are using them. That's good. That's good to know. So there's some experience out there with those, and they are time consuming, but it's worth it. I think in the long run, that we have a lot of customers that really like it, and it's also a good selling point. We haven't really talked about that. I work in pre-sales now, but one of the things that we have noticed is when we show our LCS, just a piece of it, our LCS process, and to our prospects, they really like seeing it, because this is something that I think our competitors really don't have outside of D365, as far as I'm aware of anyway. So it's a huge selling point, and most of the prospects are really impressed with it. So we always show LCS and the task recordings, just a little blip, just to give them an idea about how it works, and they are usually very impressed with it. So if anyone has any more conversation around task recordings or documentation, please let us know. We'd like to hear from you.
I laughed when I wrote that question. I was thinking to myself, I think I have done more than 100,000 task recordings.
I bet you
At least it feels like I have.
Not even counting the ones that we redid.
Right, exactly. We're not going to talk about that. Okay, well, maybe there'll be more discussion. Let's talk about task guides, which feeds right into that, right? So that's the task guides are really the value you get by doing the work associated to the task recordings. So once you have the task recording, now you have the ability to use them as task guides within D365. So how to access it? So when you're in D365, same way, you want to get to the task recorder using the little wheel icon or gear icon, and then you play your recording as a guide. And then you have the option from where is this guide? So the task recording has an extension, at AXTR extension. So where is that file that has that AXTR extension that you want to pull in? Since we always attach ours to the BPM library, I typically will run it from the BPM library. That's also part of our test. When we create a new task recording, we want to run it as a task guide and make sure that it works correctly. So we open it from Lifecycle Services. We tell it which business process library we want to open, and where within the business process library is that task guide. I mentioned this earlier, but we have lots of questions as to what libraries show here. The libraries that show here that you can run your task guide from are those that are in your project library, in the project that's attached to your D365 environment. So I'll show you where the project gets attached, but the libraries that are available to you to run your task guides are those that are your project libraries in that project. So then you select your library, and where the task is, you select OK. It will first open up just this list. So you're within D365 now, and you can use this. You can just read this if you want and go through it and do it on your own, or you can start the task guide, which I'm sure you've seen the bubbles that will walk you through the process and tell you where to fill in particular data. So this bubble will move based on what step you're on in the task guide. And then you can run it on Rails, which is the default, which means you have to do exactly the steps that you did when you recorded it. You have to go through and do those exact same steps. Or you can unlock your task guide, which allows you to go off Rails and kind of go do something else that maybe wasn't initially recorded when the task recording was done, and then you can lock it back up if you want. That's using them as task guides. Once you have the task recording and you have a link to the business process model, then using it as a task guide really is no additional effort. The effort was really in creating the task recording to begin with. Now, we do also have some customers who edit their task recordings. What we provide out of the box as part of our business process models are not edited. They're just we recorded the process, we saved it off, and then we're done. Some customers feel like they need more context. The task guide tells them what to do, like how, where to navigate and what fields to enter, but it doesn't tell them any context as to why I would choose one item over another item, or, like maybe why I would choose one customer over a different customer. And so you have the option to edit a recording to add additional context to it. So this is showing you where you could go to do that. So that's your third option when you bring up your task recording within D365, the edit recording option, which brings up this window. You have the option here using these three dots to move things around, delete, or insert. I can honestly tell you that we do not have very good luck in using these options from the edit recording mode. It seems more likely than not it confuses the process and doesn't work very well. I do have a way that I can insert steps and move things around a little bit using the playback recording. We'll talk about that at the end, but we don't have very good luck with this option in particular. But we do use the editing options. So the pencil means you want to edit that particular task. So you can click on the pencil and you can add context. Once you have context added, the pencil turns into this bubble note, which means you already have context that you've added there. But you can edit it by clicking on that button as well. And then this is just showing you what, so I have one task recording without any additional context edited, and you see it just says go to the mark, it just goes to the navigation with no additional information. If I go through the trouble of editing the task recording and adding titles and notes and context, then I see all that when I play the task guide. So now it provides me a mechanism to provide even additional information when running that task guide to add some context. And some of our customers do that for some of the key processes. Some of them don't do it at all. It's kind of, they realize that it's time consuming to do it. So maybe some of them just do it on important processes where there's a lot of confusion, maybe processes that aren't used very often. They'll go through the trouble of editing them and adding more context. Paul, can you kick off poll question 5?
Yeah, already done.
And then while you guys are answering that poll, I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about how you link your D365 to your project and to your BPM libraries. So in system administration, setup system parameters, this is where you link your D365 environment to what project. So this is your LCS project. You click this refresh button and it will bring in the business process models that are in that project. Probably the number one complaint I had was people would use the help button, the question mark on a given form, and it would never come up, or it would take an hour to come back up. Or if it did come up, it would come back up with 100 documents, and they had no idea which document they should be really using. And most of the time it was because the default here is every library is active. And what that means is when you hit the question mark on a given form, what it will do is it will say, okay, what project are you tied to? What BPMs are active? And in what order are they active? And that's where it will search for a task guide that starts on the form that you're in. So if I'm on a sales order form and I say, I don't know how to do this, I hit the question mark and hit help. The system will go through and will find the BPMs associated here. So if you have all of these active, that's why it takes 2 hours to come up. Or if you get 100 task guides found and you don't know which ones to use, it's probably because you have too many of them activated. And you really should just activate 1 or 2 key ones that you really want them to look at to find the task guide. And then I think this is just showing you. So here I'm on a particular form. I'm on the sales order form. If I'm like, I don't know how to do this, what should I do? You can hit the question mark and help. And then the system will go and bring me back task guides based on the BPM libraries that I have active in the display order that I have them in.
Okay, so let's talk for a minute. One of the things that I thought about while I was listening to Tracy that we haven't really talked about, it's kind of a tip, I guess, from us, is we found that it's good to do short recordings. So if you're doing let's say the order entry process, sometimes we may do it from the beginning all the way to the end, but most people want to see a certain piece of that. And it's easier to do the recording if you're doing it in short pieces. So if you break everything down a little bit, they can find specifically what they're looking for, and it makes your recording of it a little better too. So let's talk about how you're doing. How are you using task guides on your projects? Are they well received, and do your customers see the value in those? And have you had any barriers? Have people come up and say, I'm not going to use it, or there's a problem with it? And if so, can you tell us how you've overcome those? So we're looking for those nice volunteers. If we had a way to hand out candy, this would be the right place to hand out candy to people who answered the question or helped us with the discussion.
Well, we've got 67% do edit to add context.
Wow, that's more than I expected.
So, yeah. Anybody want to talk to us about that?
Yeah, I'm Sriran from Synergy Software Systems, Dubai. Actually, we are using largely the task recorder during the the implementation stage. Actually, the value add what our customer gets and what we offer is, see, whenever after the implementation, until the implementation, consultants are there with them. So after the implementation, when the new joinee joins, actually somebody has to train them. Otherwise, they have to go back to the partner. So what we provide as a value add to the customer, we provide this task recorder as a library. And when a new joinee joins on a what you call probation period or induction period, they are using this document because somebody joins in accounts payable, receivable, or a warehouse man, he can go through the document and he can understand the system quickly, how to navigate, where to go, all these things in the document. So previously, actually, we are in this version since version 3. Those days, the task recorder was not there. We used to screen capture, do all documentations. Now it helps a lot. With this BPM and in place, it's a customer can use this in future. They can add multiple libraries going forward. They do any enhancements, etc.
And do you find that it has sped up your implementation time as well?
See, sometimes yes, sometimes no, because it needs documentation to be edited as per the customer requirement. Okay, they may need additional screenshots. Those are all the things. Yes, it helps really.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're able to, once you're finished with your implementation, turn these documents over to the customers and they take them and go with them. Do you find that to be true?
Come again, sorry.
Like when you, once you're finished with the implementation, do you find that your customers take the documentation and continue on with it, upgrade it when they need to, and make changes to it?
Yes. They are trained in task recorder as well. So what they do, they create and they add versions. Even the customer goes to another partner, come back again. So there is a version control they maintain. It's easy to take over the customer again.
Good.
Okay.
Good. Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to talk about their experience with task guides and how well or not well your customers have received them?
Hi, it's Stephen. I'm also from Synergy. Just a few comments. I think the task guides are probably used more than the business process modeler. I think the business process modeler, a lot of the content seems to go back to the Navision days when they had the same diagrams, and they don't seem to be updated very much since. So you have to create your own, which is what you've been doing, obviously. And not everybody wants to put that work in, or they maybe find that they do it in other tools like Excel and Visio and so on, because there's quite a lot of functionality there. I think it's important to distinguish between what should be done in BPM and what should be done in DevOps. I think you can overdo it in BPM, 2 or 3 levels of hierarchy is enough, and then probably DevOps should take over. I do think the task guides are very good. There are some issues with performance sometimes, but you don't necessarily need to use them in your live system, all of them. You might just use them in training on test systems, for example. And I think once you've got a task guide created, it serves multiple purposes. It can support your ISO processes, as because you should have one consistent set of documents, not 2 different ones. I think it can support your training, obviously. It can support test scripts. It can support pilot scripts. So there are, I think, a lot of benefits to the tool. And if people aren't using it, then I would definitely say they're missing out. I think the customer's willingness to take ownership varies considerably, as it does with everything else. Some customers want to own the system, and some really just see it as another job they have to manage. It's the same with security, it's the same with data load and all the rest of it. I do think that it's very advisable for customers to take ownership, because they're not always going to want to pay for a consultant to do the work, and these things fall into disuse, and new people come in and learn bad habits or the old way, and systems change and so on. So it is, I think, part of the job of the consultancies to advocate these as a tool that they should own, and they have to understand that in the long run, it probably makes their life easier when it comes to, whether it be inducting new staff or whether it dealing with audits or, whatever it may be. So I've said a lot of things there, but just to say, I think the task recorder I'm a big fan of. The BPN I'm slightly less of a fan of, because I guess in our company we have other tools. We do a lot of work with RPA, with robotics, with Visio, so we may use those instead, particularly where we have non-dynamics parts of the project flows that we also have to cover. Yeah?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. I think you made me think of another point. You really have to have buy-in from the customer project manager. That from the beginning. I know I've been on a few projects where, if you have a buy-in from the customer side and sort of a mandate from the project manager, this is what we're going to do, it seems to flow better throughout the whole team. If you don't have your customer project manager on board, sometimes it's a struggle, like you said. So thank you very much, Stephen. Okay, I guess we're ready to move on. Okay, great.
We are in the last section. So now we're going to talk about this last part of this playback task recording. So playback task recording is helpful, but only in certain limited situations that we have found anyway. So the playback task recording, if you haven't done it, so when you go to the task recorder, it's your fourth option here to play back the recording. It will play back the recording exactly how you recorded it. And you can set it in auto mode. Basically, you pull up which task recording you want it to play back, and then you have the option to either move, play to a particular step or play all the steps. What I have found is that for some tasks, let's say, for example, if you're going to create a new customer and you play back a recording in the same environment that you created the recording, the task recording, then when you play back the recording, it will error because it's a duplicate, because you've already created that customer, because again, it's doing exactly the same thing you did before. So it doesn't work very well in those types of situations. It works better like if I'm going to process a sales order, like maybe I need to have I'm going to enter a sales order for a given customer and a given item. I can run that over and over again because I'll just create multiple sales orders similar to the first time I created the sales order. So it works much better in those types of situations. If I have one of those, like let's say I did an end-to-end task recording where I talked about creating a sales order and processing it all the way through invoicing using advanced warehousing in the middle, I can, and let's say I forgot a step in the middle, I forgot an important step, something I wanted to show, the playback, the recording, I can use the playback recording to get to the step where I forgot what I wanted to do, play it to that step, then go do the thing I forgot, and then continue playing it. And what that will do is it will create a new task recording with that step inserted at the right place. That means I don't have to re-record the whole recording. I can just play it back, redo the one step I missed, and then complete the task recording. And then I can use that task recording to overwrite the old one with the forgotten step in it. So that is one way I use it. The other way, the other kind of tip to worry about is that it does the whole data privacy issue. The task recording is going to play exactly what you entered. So if you entered in data when you created the task recording, the playback is going to enter in that same data. If you recorded your task recording by not entering in data by selecting from a list, then the playback recording, if you play that in a different environment, and let's say you selected the 10th item in your list when you recorded it, and you play it back in a different environment, it will attempt to select the 10th item, which may or may not have been set up the same way as the initial item was, and so you might run into some issues in that playback. So like I said, we use it for limited usages. When it works well, but a lot of times it doesn't work based on what type of recording it is. And it is doing processing live data, so it's not, if you run a task recording in playback mode in a live environment, it's going to do exactly what it what it did initially. So it might create a brand new sales order, and it's going to save that data in that environment that you played in. So it's important to understand it's not pretend, it's not, it's actually saving data on your environment. All right.
Okay,
Discussion.
so yeah, so let's talk about the playback option. Like Tracy said, we don't use it that much. And I remember when it first came out, it was super fast. It was like it went through the whole thing so fast. It's like you didn't even really know what you just saw. But do you guys, does anybody actually really use that playback option very much? And if so, what do you use it for? We just kind of like to know ourselves how other people are using it and how you find it useful, and what works for you in those regards and what does not. So if anybody's using that playback recording, or if anybody's attempted to and not had good response back from it, let us know, because we would like to know what other people are going through.
One idea you can use the playback for is not for data entry, but just for navigation. So when you start up in the morning, the system, I might say, is cold, the cache needs topping up. So if you just navigate across your favorite screens you use most often, and then you kick off the task recording with the batch task overnight, it'll be warmed up before you come in the morning.
That is brilliant.
Yes. See, that's great.
That.
That's great. We hadn't thought about that, and we could use that. So, wow, that's good input.
I'll give you one other idea as well. What we use it for, independent of the training side, is to make it easy to document all the configuration screens. So if you have a standard navigation, you can play back going to each configuration screen and capturing it, and then self-document your implementation.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Good point. Yeah. Tracy, you may be able to use some of that for the Edge product. Do you use the playback recording for Edge?
I do. So I have like 250 recordings that touch every one of the Edge. So that Edge is our intellectual property. So I have task recordings that touch every form that we have modified as part of our Edge solution, both from setting it up and execution. So if I have a clean environment, I can use my task recordings and run through them, and I like to watch them. I like to, make sure everything looks the same, and so that's part of my own testing on the product, particularly with new releases come out. I run through my task recordings and just make sure that nothing's been impacted or nothing's been changed. And then our testing, our QA person also uses those as a starting point, those task recordings, to do his RSAT testing as well. So.
And one of the things that we really didn't talk about that much earlier when we were talking about it is the ability to run this, like Steve said, and warm up your system is great. And it also gives you the option of running through everything to make sure if you're getting ready to do let's say a demo, and you want to make sure everything's set up correctly, you can run it through that process just to make sure that you've got all your data set up correctly as well. That's a good point. So it's kind of used a little bit for testing as well. And Tracy, I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, but one of the other things that maybe we could make a good point of is if you have a customization, basically you record that customization and add it to your library. So it doesn't have to be just out of the box processes that you have documented and recorded. It's also things that you've added as customizations. You can record those and add those to your library as well. Do we have a poll here that we wanted to check in on?
I don't know if we have. I don't think so.
Okay.
No, we don't.
We've done 5 polls so far, right, Paul?
Yeah.
Okay. So we just overall the discussion questions. Okay,
I think you had a slide. Did you have a slide right before this one?
Yeah, it was fine. It was just kind of summarizing the value layers. So we talked about all these different aspects of the business process model and how, you could start small and just do a structure, or as somebody mentioned, you could actually skip that part and just do the task recordings if you wanted. But ideally, you could do all the elements of it and build on it. So at the end of the day, you have this growing repository, just-in-time training, and a business process model that represents the entire system, including ISVs, including enhancements, one place for all the documentation.
Okay, good. Thanks. So we have one last poll. I think Paul's already sent it out there for you. It's probably for us the most important. We'd like to know how you feel about the presentation, and be honest and tell us if you think it's great or maybe not so great. We'll try to improve it every time if we can. So go in there and answer that one, and then let's just kind of have an overall discussion. Anybody want to step up and speak about how they're using the BPM, and if you have any tips for us that you haven't seen that we could probably use in our implementations or help our customers with? And how do you have any opinions about how to increase the BPM adoption? We've heard some things already about some of the shortcomings, and we know how much work it is, and you really have to commit to the time, and you have to commit your staff to it. And you know, there's been some happy hour afternoons after doing BPM work that were well needed and deserved. So anybody want to jump in there and just talk a little bit about how you've used the BPM, or any part of the task guides, the recordings, any part of what we talked about today? We'd love to hear from you.